Hi again, everybody. We are not that more, but I hope that more will join us. I would like to invite here Ivan Genadiev. Ivan, welcome on stage. Could you please present shortly yourself and start? Thank you.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. My name is Ivan Genadiev, and I'm the founding partner of Teres Capital. Most of you probably haven't heard about us, but I'm hoping this can change in the next few weeks. We are currently finalizing the raising of an early stage venture capital fund dedicated to regional startups. And the idea is to invest in teams that are that originate here, but ultimately target the global markets. I think that ties nicely to the topic of today's talk, namely smart money in emerging ecosystems, how everything looks from here. So without any further ado, I can start, walk you through the slides, and then if there's any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer them. So I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world trying to talk about Bulgaria and the region and why it's a good place to invest people's money. And the question we always get in places as diverse as London, NYC, and Silicon Valley is, why Bulgaria? Why this country that most of us haven't heard about? Why is it such a special place for venture capital? Does anyone have any ideas or clues why it could be a good place for people from abroad, from NYC, from Silicon Valley, or from London to invest their money? Yeah? Okay, that's one. Internet connection is a very good one, actually. And the several investors we've managed to get over here to see things for themselves are very impressed by the speed. Yep. Corporate tax, okay. Excellent. Well, I think we're on the same page here, which is great. It makes me think we haven't missed anything important. We always start with talking about economic advantages. Growth is something that people in Bulgaria don't usually feel a lot of, but it's something that actually sets us apart from the rest of the countries in the region and Europe as a whole. It's actually expected to converge to the Euro average levels more quickly than some people might anticipate, so that's an exciting thing. Another thing that was mentioned is technical talent. Actually, average per capita availability of technical talent is quite high here. There's a lot of engineers, there's a lot of software developers here, and that's something that hasn't happened overnight. That's something that has its origins even before democracy came to Bulgaria, when Bulgaria was one of the leaders, if not the leader, in the IT manufacturing sector in the whole former socialist bloc. And that pool of knowledge, that pool of talent, which was passed through the generations, was a big factor in what happened in the late 90s, which is when the outsourcing industry started to look at Bulgaria very actively. That activity increased even more after Bulgaria became a fully fledged EU member in 2007. And quickly enough, the IT industry started being the fastest growing industry in all of Bulgaria. So these are all very interesting macro advantages that impress people. I'm personally very impressed by what's been happening in the past couple of years, 2 or 3 years. I was out of Bulgaria for an extended period of time before that, and when I came back, I found something very different than the Bulgaria I remembered when I left. There's a very vibrant entrepreneurship community, which is partly fueled by the emergence of accelerators and angel investors here in the region, but also I think fueled by the fact that a lot of people take the example of a place like Silicon Valley, get inspired, and start thinking that being an entrepreneur is something honorable, it's something useful, it's something that can actually make you money. So that increased willingness to take risk is something that I've really appreciated in Bulgaria recently. And it's actually, again, as a statistic, its seed funding scene is the biggest per capita in Europe right now. There's clear market advantages on top of that utilize these macro conditions. I would point out two very impressive one. The capital efficiency. What do I mean by that? If you compare a venture capital investment spectrum, right from putting in money at an entry valuation, through funding a company during its life cycle, through exiting it, you get a lot more bang for your buck in a place like Bulgaria. Let's face it, $50,000 still mean a lot here. It can barely buy your team coffee and salaries for a month in a place like Silicon Valley. So that in itself is a very compelling value proposition for investors. They like to see that they can make money, not just participate in a burgeoning ecosystem, which sounds nice, but let's face it, it's really about the money in the end. And speaking about money, cost of labor here, we have all this amazing talent, and still it's available at only a fraction of the cost in some of the more developed countries, chiefly the United States. I think Bulgaria has a fairly central position in the region, and I don't just mean geographically. I also mean in terms of its what I would call status as an informal tech capital of Central and Eastern Europe. There's a lot of, as I mentioned, seed funding. There's a lot of technical talent. There's a lot of entrepreneurial activity. There's Webit. So I think we're quickly establishing ourselves as the hub of where you can actually not just invest in Bulgaria, but also look at exciting opportunities that involve the entire region. All of this is great. What it does inevitably is it breeds comparisons. People like to compare it to something they already know. So we've been compared, to a lot of things, including grand phrases like the Soviet Silicon Valley, which in my opinion have a mixed meaning behind them. But it's usually useful for people to visualize something that they can relate to. And again, we're barely the only ones who have enjoyed the benefits of that. There's a long list of Silicon somethings: Berlin, London, even New York with its tech alley. The truth is actually, as a friend of mine says, stating that your region will be the next Silicon Valley is a bit like digging a hole in your yard and calling it the next Grand Canyon. It's useful to be able to relate. It's useful to have milestones in mind. It's useful to picture your progress when you compare it to something already exists. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be realistic about where you are and what you're really strong and special. And I think there's a mixed picture here in Bulgaria currently. There's a lot of upsides. As the ecosystem matures, we have a lot of founders who gain a lot of experience. Even if someone hasn't succeeded with their first startup, they can always move on to a second or third one, and with every other one, they get more experienced and more exposed. The accelerators I mentioned are fueling that. The low cost of doing business is something that's important. The EU membership and the access to markets throughout the European Union is very important as well. And again, the engineering potential that we've had for a while now is something that will never change. It will always be an upside. That being said, we still have, I believe, a few areas of improvement. I identified three main areas. One is founder culture. Second one is disruptive products. And the last one is smart money, which is the main topic of today's talk. Let's take a closer look at each of these. And again, if you're wondering, well, why hasn't he started talking about smart money yet? Well, this is the reason, because we need to build it up in a way that explains all the things that are happening behind it. Founder culture. Two things that are still working against us more than for us is the fact that we have a pretty small local market. So scalability is an issue. Not everyone can wake up and find themselves in Silicon Valley the next day. So that's something that we need to address more meaningfully. One way to do it is to really find a niche in a small economy that Bulgaria is. Another way to do it is to think about regional expansion where it makes sense. And obviously the third way to do it, and one that's an aspiration for a lot of entrepreneurs, is to go to a place like the United States. I actually find a lot of value in this model, because if you can build a system, if you can build a business where you have the business development function, where you have your sales, maybe even your intellectual property, in a mature market like the United States, while the technology cost center is in a place like Bulgaria, this makes a lot of different sense for strategic and for financial reasons. Also, a function of the flourishing ecosystem is the fact that it hasn't flourished yet, and a function of that is the fact that the big tech companies out there, the blue chips, haven't started looking into Bulgaria actively for acquisitions. So one way to do that is to make a company that started in Bulgaria more visible by it having some presence in the United States, like I just talked about. The disruptive products. Now, this is something we have a lot of feedback from some of our investors on, and they say, you know, we see a lot of really talented people, but a lot of what we see is derivative. meaning it's been inspired by something that's already in existence. And for a market like Turkey, for example, where you have scale, that makes sense, and you see a lot of that activity, and you see people making money and developing well. I think for a market like Bulgaria and even the larger region, that makes slightly less sense. I personally believe that Bulgaria has a big advantage going for it, which some people might consider a disadvantage. It's not part of the Silicon Valley mainstream of ideas, of talent, of activity. And by virtue of that, we can actually think more creatively about products, about ideas, about ways to solve problems that are not influenced by what's happening in a true hub like Silicon Valley. So I really don't think we should limit our imagination and our creativity. We should really start there and then think about how to execute it right. You can see some of the startups that people find on a daily basis, and hence they form the impression there's not a lot of disruption here. Really, what really excites people is something truly impressive, both on the outside and on the inside. There's a company out of Croatia called Rimac. Very few people know about it. People in the States virtually don't know about it. And it's a company that manufactured the world's fastest accelerating electric car. Think of all the applications of that. Think of all the potential acquirers, Tesla included. So I think that's a story we have yet to develop and build upon. And that brings me to the core of the message, smart money. How we can actually accomplish some of the things, some of the areas of improvement that I outlined. I think smart money is really a very important part of the recipe. If you were to outline very broadly the funding ecosystem in the region right now, you would see a lot of activity on the front end of things, the sort of pre-early stage thing. You have a lot of accelerators, some of which are regionally dedicated, others are global, that sometimes turn their attention to the region. And on the other end, you have later stage activity, which consists mainly of regionally active global VCs taking an occasional look at things in the region. But again, that happens only occasionally, and that happens usually in the later stages. So I think building that founder culture, building that bravery for innovative, disruptive product is something that's really going to help us complete the ecosystem by getting a lot more smart money investors involved earlier on in the process. They can inform the strategy of the company, they can help refine the idea, and they can provide the necessary funding and expertise and connections and network for that company to have a more realistic access to the global market. So if there's one message here, I would say, don't just think about how you can make money today, think about how you can be as original as possible, as brave as possible, as creative as possible. And then work with people like us, like the accelerators, like some of the other investors that are active in the region, in helping us match you to a really experienced global investor with a lot of traction, with a lot of track record, and with that smart money potential that can be infused in your company. Just a few inspirational stories that I think provide a good example of what I'm trying to instill in you. There's a company that was started here in Bulgaria that ended up being acquired by SoundCloud. I think most people in this room would have heard the name of Telerik. They have several hundred people in the United States already. They're building a second big building in Sofia. It's a company which has had tremendous traction and tremendous success in a relatively short period of time, and we still expect to see more great things from it. Also, deals on the earlier stages, in this case a Series A round that we at Teres had the pleasure to be personally involved with, along with LaunchHub, Tim Draper, whose family is considered one of the founding families of venture capital in Silicon Valley, and Early Bird Venture Capital. I think Dan Lupo is here and he's going to talk to you a little later. We were able to invest in these founders who really believed that their idea was, one, original, they have 2 US patents behind it, and 2, suited for the global markets. They didn't hold back from dreaming big. And in only a matter of months, they were able to effectively relocate their headquarters in Silicon Valley, which is exactly what the kind of model I spoke about a couple of minutes ago. Technology cost center here, business development in Silicon Valley. In short, this is the message I hope I can instill to you today, and I'm really excited about what lies ahead, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, or maybe later during the panel discussion.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.